He fell from the sky without a parachute, not because he forgot it, not because he lost it, but because it was burning while he was still inside the plane. 3 miles above Germany, 19-year-old tail gunner had one choice left: burn alive in a flaming bomber, or jump into the darkness and accept death. He chose the fall. And what happened next is one of the most unbelievable and absolutely true stories of World War II. His name was Nicholas Stephen Alkemade, 19 years old, a quiet boy from Loughborough, England. He wasn't a daredevil. He wasn't a hero looking for glory. He was just a calm, steady young man with a steady hand and a belief that he was simply doing his duty. On March 24th, 1944, Nicholas took his position inside the rear turret of a Lancaster bomber, the most vulnerable seat on the aircraft. Behind him was nothing but a thin shell of metal and the endless black sky. It was his 20th mission. Experienced, yes, but every man in Bomber Command knew experience didn't keep you alive. Luck did. The target that night was Berlin, the most dangerous mission of all. Searchlights sliced through the darkness. Flak exploded like black flowers in the sky. The Lancaster trembled under the impact of each blast. And then, out of nowhere, a German night fighter struck. A burst of cannon fire tore through the fuselage. Fuel ignited instantly. Flames raced down the aircraft like a living creature, swallowing everything in their path. Nicholas was trapped. His turret was burning. The metal around him began to glow red hot. The hatch release melted in the fire. Smoke filled his lungs. The temperature rose so fast that his skin began to blister. He reached for his parachute and froze. It was gone, burning, completely destroyed. In that instant, Nicholas understood the truth. He had 2 choices: stay in the aircraft and burn alive, or jump into the night sky with no parachute at all. He looked at the flames consuming the bomber. He imagined the pain of dying in fire. He knew what he had to do. He opened the turret, felt the night wind slam into him like ice, and let go. The bomber disappeared above him, an expanding ball of fire, and Nicholas fell into total silence. No sound, no fear, just the cold air rushing past as the forest rose toward him from below. He closed his eyes, and his final thought was, "At least it will be quick." And then everything went black.
When Nicholas opened his eyes, he didn't see flames. He didn't see the night sky. He didn't see anything that suggested he had just fallen 3 miles without a parachute. He saw tree branches, broken, snapped, all around him. He blinked, confused. His body ached, but not in the way someone's body should ache after a fatal fall. For a moment, he wondered if he had already died, and this was simply what came after. But then, the cold hit him, the sharp smell of pine, the weight of his frozen uniform. He was alive. He didn't know how. He didn't understand why, but he was alive. Nicholas tried to move his arms. They responded. His legs, bruised but working. No broken bones, no internal bleeding, not even a concussion strong enough to blur his memory. It made no sense. A fall from that height should have shattered every bone in his body. No one survived a jump from a burning bomber without a parachute. It was impossible. But then he looked up and saw the answer. He had crashed through a dense cluster of fir trees, a natural cushion that slowed his fall branch after branch, each one taking a little momentum, each one absorbing a little force, turning what should have been instant death into bruises, scratches, and one torn knee. Below the trees was deep, soft snow, a final landing pad created by nature itself. Still half in shock, Nicholas tried to stand. He managed to get to his knees, breathing hard, lungs burning from smoke and cold. And then he did something extraordinary, something that showed exactly what kind of young man he really was. He checked his watch. It still worked. He wrote later, "I fell at 00:20. I regained consciousness at 00:45, 25 minutes after the fall." Not only had he survived, he was alert enough to record the time. That was when he noticed movement in the distance. Voices, torches, figures moving between the trees. Nazi soldiers. He couldn't run. His leg was injured. His lungs were raw from smoke. He had no weapon. There was nowhere to go. The Germans surrounded him, shouting orders as they raised their rifles. Nicholas put his hands up, slowly, painfully. He wasn't afraid of dying anymore. He had already accepted death once that night. But what happened next was even stranger than surviving the fall. One of the German soldiers stepped forward and looked him up and down, and froze. The man pointed behind Nicholas at the shattered branches, the crushed snow, and the long, impossible trail cut through the treetops. The soldier said something quietly to the others. Then, they lowered their guns. They didn't treat him like an enemy. They treated him like a miracle. The Germans helped him stand, supported him by the arms, and led him carefully through the forest. Nicholas had survived the fall, but he had no idea that what awaited him next would be just as unbelievable. Because when he told the Germans how he survived, they refused to believe him.
The German soldiers brought Nicholas to a small wooden outpost at the edge of the forest. Inside, the air was thick with smoke from a small iron stove. A lantern flickered above, casting long shadows across the room. They sat him down on a bench and began questioning him in broken English. Name, unit, aircraft. Nicholas answered calmly. He had nothing to hide. He was a downed airman. The war had rules for this. He expected to become a prisoner of war. But then, one of the officers asked, "Where is your parachute?" Nicholas looked at him and gave the only answer he could. I didn't have one. The room went silent. The Germans stared at him, not understanding. You jumped? Without? The officer repeated slowly. Nicholas nodded. He explained. His parachute had been burned. His turret was on fire, and his only choice was to jump or burn alive. He told them how he fell through the fir trees and landed in deep snow. The Germans exchanged glances. A few smirked. One laughed, thinking Nicholas was lying to hide the location of other airmen. The officer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. No parachute? 3 kilometers? And you live? He shook his head. Impossible. But Nicholas stayed calm. He knew it sounded unbelievable. He would have doubted it himself. So he told them exactly where he fell, exactly what he remembered, exactly how the trees broke his fall. The Germans said nothing. They stepped outside and spoke among themselves. Nicholas waited, listening to the muffled voices beyond the wall. He didn't know what they would decide. He didn't know if they believed him or thought he was mocking them. He didn't know if he would live through the night. Minutes passed. Then the door opened. The soldiers motioned him to stand and follow them. They didn't take him to a prison. They didn't shackle him or blindfold him. They brought him back into the forest, to the spot where he had fallen. The lanterns lit up the broken branches high above them, straight down through the heart of the tree line, a trail carved from the top of the forest to the snow at their feet. It was real. The soldiers stood silently, looking upward at the path Nicholas had carved with his own body, a path no human was ever supposed to leave behind. One of the Germans crossed himself. Another whispered something Nicholas didn't catch. The officer who questioned him earlier simply stared at him with a mixture of disbelief and respect. And then he said quietly, "Wunder. It is a wonder." From that moment on, Nicholas wasn't treated like an enemy, not even like a prisoner. He was treated like a man who had done the impossible, a man who had looked death in the face and been refused. The Germans escorted him with surprising care to the local Luftwaffe headquarters. There, officers gathered around, listening in stunned silence as Nicholas repeated his story. They took notes, measured the height and the fall on a map, and compared his words to what they found in the forest. Everything matched. Every detail. Every footprint in the snow. And finally, after verifying everything, they issued a report that would echo through history. British airman survives fall from 18,000 feet without parachute. The Germans, fighting the same war, the same brutal night skies, understood better than anyone else just how impossible this survival truly was. Nicholas had done the miraculous, and both sides of the war agreed on it.
Nicholas was taken not to a cell, not to a dark basement, not to a place where prisoners were kept in chains, but to a heated office inside the Luftwaffe interrogation center. There, German officers crowded around him like students listening to a lecturer. They weren't hostile, they weren't suspicious, they were fascinated. One officer, a gray-haired major with tired eyes, studied Nicholas for a long moment and said, "You did something tonight no pilot on either side has ever done." They removed his burned flight jacket, gave him bandages, and treated his wounds. German military doctors cleaned the burns on his arms, checked his lungs, and even gave him a warm drink to steady his shaking hands. Nicholas couldn't believe it. Hours ago, these men were firing guns at his bomber. Now they were taking care of him. Because in the world of pilots, even enemy pilots, there existed an unspoken code: respect the impossible. While the doctors worked, a young German officer placed a blank paper and a pencil on the table. "Write everything," he said. "Every detail. We want the truth, exactly as you lived it." Nicholas described the fire, the burning parachute, the fall through the trees. He wrote calmly, as if documenting someone else's miracle. The Germans read the page in silence. Then they passed it around like a relic. One of them shook his head and murmured, "No one will believe this." But they did believe. They had seen the crash site. They had seen the broken branches. They had seen Nicholas standing there, alive, when he absolutely should not have been. The officer stamped the paper and said, "We will report this to Berlin." By the next morning, Nicholas was transferred to Stalag Luft 3, the same prisoner of war camp famous for the Great Escape. But word of his survival reached the camp before he did. When Nicholas entered, limping on his injured leg, the other Allied prisoners rushed toward him. They had heard rumors, whispers passed from guard to guard, that a British airman had fallen from the sky without a parachute and lived. Nicholas didn't have to say a word. The men gathered around him and simply stared. One American prisoner finally broke the silence. "Mate, how in God's name are you standing?" Nicholas managed a small, shy smile. "I fell, but the forest caught me." Laughter exploded around him, not mocking, but full of awe and pure disbelief. He wasn't just another prisoner. He was a legend. Even the German guards treated him differently. Some approached him quietly, asking to hear the story firsthand. One guard even said, "If you had crashed in a field, you would be dead. If you had crashed on rock, you would be dead. But you crashed in the one place that wanted you alive." Every night in the barracks, Nicholas retold the story to new arrivals, to curious officers, to men desperate for hope in a place built on despair. And every time he told it, he ended with the same sentence: "I thought I was choosing how to die. I didn't know that I was choosing how to live." But the war wasn't over. The prisons weren't safe, and Nicholas had no idea that another twist of fate was waiting for him, one that would confirm his survival to the world in the most unexpected way. In the final months of the war,
Stalag Luft 3 was evacuated. Guards marched prisoners through snow and ice as the front lines closed in. Nicholas marched with them, his injured leg aching, his lungs still tender from the might of the fire. But the story of his fall marched with him too. Guards whispered it like a rumor. Prisoners shared it like a miracle. And even as the war collapsed around them, one name kept returning like a spark of impossible hope. Alkemade, the man who fell from the sky. On May 4th, 1945, Nicholas and the other prisoners were finally liberated by Allied forces. When British officers saw him, they immediately pulled him aside. They had questions, a lot of them. His squadron had reported him missing. His bomber had been seen exploding in midair. His crew was believed dead. And now here he was, standing in front of them, alive, with burns on his arms and pine needles still embedded in the seams of his uniform. "How did you get out?" they asked. "Where did you land? Where is your parachute?" Nicholas gave the same answer he gave the Germans. "I didn't have one." The British officers exchanged uneasy glances. They weren't sure whether to believe him. Men simply didn't fall from 18,000 feet and survive. But then, the Germans did something extraordinary. They handed the British every document they had compiled on Nicholas, the fall site, the evidence, the measurements, the signed statement, and even eyewitness accounts from the guards who found him. The Germans had verified the miracle more thoroughly than anyone else could. It was official. The story was true. After the war ended, Nicholas returned to England. He walked into his old squadron, and the room fell silent. Men stared at him as if seeing a ghost. Someone whispered, "Alkemade, but you were dead." Nicholas just smiled. He had been reported killed in action. His name was on lists. His parents had been notified. The RAF immediately launched its own inquiry. They interviewed German officers, sent personnel to examine the crash site, and checked the Luftwaffe reports. Everything matched. The RAF then issued the only document of its kind in the entire war. Sergeant Nicholas Alkemade survived a fall of 18,000 feet without a parachute and suffered only minor injuries. This wasn't myth. This wasn't legend. This was military fact. What Nicholas did next showed the world exactly what kind of young man he truly was. He didn't seek fame. He didn't write books. He didn't tour theaters telling his story for money. He went home, married his sweetheart, and got a job making furniture in a factory. He lived quietly, humbly, gratefully, because he knew that every day after that fall was a gift few people ever receive. But the story wasn't finished. There was one final moment, one extraordinary twist that brought Nicholas face to face with the burned wreckage of the bomber he should have died in. A discovery made years later would close the circle in a way no one expected.
Years passed. The world rebuilt itself. Cities rose from ashes. Skies grew quiet again. And for most people, the war became a memory, a distant chapter of history. But for Nicholas, there was one thing that never left him. That night sky, that burning bomber, that impossible fall into the arms of a cold German forest. He tried to forget it. He tried to live simply. A job, a family, quiet evenings in a small English home. But sometimes, when the wind blew a certain way, or the sky turned the same shade of deep blue as that night in 1944, he remembered. Not with fear, not with pain, with gratitude. Then, in the 1960s, Nicholas received a message from a historian in Germany. They had found something. Deep in the forest, covered in moss and rust, laid the remains of Lancaster DS-664, the bomber he had jumped from, the same aircraft that had burned around him, the same wreckage that should have been his grave. Nicholas traveled to Germany to see it. When he arrived, the forest was calm, almost peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the tall trees. Birds sang overhead, the same branches that once broke his fall. And there it was, the twisted, blackened metal of the bomber's tail section, the shattered turret, the melted fragments of his parachute. Time had not erased it. Nature had not swallowed it. The wreckage still bore witness to the night he fell through fire and survived. Nicholas stood in silence, touching the cold metal. It felt unreal, as if he were standing next to a version of himself that never lived past that night. A German forest ranger approached him slowly. He had been a young boy living nearby during the war. He looked at Nicholas and said quietly, "We didn't believe the story at first, but when we saw the branches broken from the treetops down to the snow, we knew. The forest saved you." Nicholas nodded. He already knew that. But hearing it from someone who had been there, who had seen the miracle with his own eyes, made the moment real in a way nothing else could. Before leaving, Nicholas bent down, picked up a small piece of the wreckage, a charred scrap of metal, and held it in his hand. He didn't take it as a trophy. He didn't take it as proof. He took it as a reminder of the night he chose how to die and ended up choosing how to live. Nicholas Alkemade lived to the age of 64. He raised a family. He worked honest jobs. He told his story rarely and only when asked. But when he did, he always ended it the same way. "I wasn't saved by luck. I was saved to remember those who didn't come home." His survival was not just a miracle of physics. It was a miracle of meaning. And today, by hearing his story, you are helping keep that meaning alive.
If you want more true stories of courage, survival, and the forgotten voices of World War II, subscribe to this channel. Every story we tell keeps another name from being lost to history. Thank you for watching, and remember, some miracles happen so they can be shared.